Okay, there's no reason to document taking this completely apart, as I've done that a couple of times on the channel. So I'm going to go ahead and just get it apart, and then we'll start talking about what it is that we're going to modify and the reasons for doing so. Okay, so we have the carburetor dismantled, and let's talk about the elephant in the room. So when the 3839 PWK was originally released, we put them onto the 1985 through 1989 ATC TRX 250R, and they worked really good. That carburetor quickly became kind of the staple of the carburetors for an aftermarket upgrade. But when you were to put one of those carburetors on a 125 or an 80, they had absolutely terrible throttle response at low end. So Kian came back with the idea of putting in fins, helping to direct more airflow over the top of the main jet and especially the pilot jet orifice, and thus helping to increase the signal across these. Remember, the smaller engines do not have the strength of signal like a larger engine does. So they put the fins in there, and that made a world difference. Along with that, they also raised the top of the emotionary tube. Okay, so all of this to help increase signal sensitivity on this carburetor. Now that worked great on those engines, but you put it on a 250R or a 310R or a 330R, a 363R, on and up. Then these carburetors, especially on the pilot jet and on their needle, they are hypersensitive, and that makes them very difficult to build. Now, there are people out there that are going to say, "Oh, Dave, I've got one. My builder put one on my bike and it works just fine." Okay, listen, not everybody builds an engine that has good, strong signal. So if your carburetor that is an air striker is working good on your specific setup, more than likely it is a weak signal. Now, that's not to say anything bad about it, but myself and Arlen, we build engines that have strong signals so that the carburetor works very good with the engine and they have amazing bottom end power. All right. So remember, there's not an absolute to everything, but 99% of the time, this is the reason why people hate these carburetors. So the idea originally was to get rid of the fins, knock this down to the height that it is on a regular PWK, but I wanted to take it one step farther, and that was to reshape the bell, a design that would lessen the boundary layer in here, and that came about by doing a lot of testing in Autodesk CFD, Computational Fluid Dynamics, and 3D printing a bunch of bells and then testing them on the flow bench to see which shape would maximize this airflow coming into here to help increase the CFM of the carburetor. All right. So the work that I do back here is to help the carburetor show higher CFM without changing the bore diameter at the throat. Okay, so when I say the throat, I mean the area right over the top of the emotionary system. All right. So the next thing is, though, is if you want to take it one step farther, take this and taper bore it. Put this on the CNC and then go in here and CNC bore this out, get rid of the fins, and reshape the bell. Okay, so I have different size stubs that go into the 3-jaw. Now, for the machinists out there, there is about 1/1000th of an inch run out on this. I am going to switch this out to a collet chuck, and that is getting replaced with a drive so that I can do constant surface speed and threading. But I'll tell you right now, the lathe doesn't get near the upgrades that my CNC mill does, because I use the mill the majority of the time and the lathe only when it's necessary. Not because I like one or the other, it's just in what I do, the mill gets more use than what the lathe does. So anyway, this has been turned to fit this very net, okay? And then what's going to happen is this assembly is going to go in here. I'm going to insert it down in here and then put this Allen head through it and attach it to this stub. And that will hold this for the CNC lathe operation. Okay, so you can get a good idea of how that is being held in there. And you can see down in here where that screw is at. So, to save time, I'm not going to show you the whole lathing operation because there's a bunch of videos of that are already on the page. So I'm going to go ahead and fire this thing up, let it do its job, and then when it's done, we'll come back and take a look at the finish, and then we'll work on the other end. Okay, so maybe a little bit of cutting action. You can hear it cutting off the fins and then starting to reshape the bell. Okay, so step one is complete. Now it's time to flip it around and go ahead and taper bore the other end of it. So here we are doing the taper bore on the carburetor. So the emulsionary shroud is going to get machined down to 0.22, and that is going to be from right here to the top of it. It's going to leave just a little bit of this cutaway. All right, to put a summary on this, without changing the throat diameter on the carburetor, as you can see, we've been able to increase the CFM by almost 2 CFM, right around 1.5 to 2 CFM, when you're like, that's not very much. On that small of a carburetor, on this small of an engine, that's a pretty big gain, and you can see it on the dyno, and that comes from the rebelling of the carburetor. The increase in throttle response comes from the taper bores. A lot of people are not going to have the ability out there to do the rebelling, but what I will tell you is that the good majority of throttle increase is going to come from the taper bore. Now, people are going to say, well, Dave, you showed us stuff, but you didn't really give us any information as provided, you know, the angles that you cut at and the CNC program that you're using, but I've shown you where to go looking for the power. Now it's your responsibility to take that journey and learn things along the way that you wouldn't learn if I just handed it to you. So I know that's going to make some people be like, oh, well, this video isn't a very good video because it doesn't hand the information to me. Well, if you're that type of a person, you're never going to learn anything anyways. I've shown you where to go looking for the stuff. I've already shown you on the dyno what the increases are. So take what you've seen here and go on your own journey of discovery and figure out how to do this and make it better than what I have. This is Dave Moore Racing. I'm out.